This has been on my list a few days, and it's become on my list because for whatever reason I've been listening and reading a lot about this subject recently, and it has, again, it's made things very thought-provoking for me. Not sure my opinion of it hasn't changed, but it's definitely I've been thinking about this subject with a lot of religion in mind and spirituality in mind, and what the Bible says about it. So I'd like to explore your thoughts on abortion.
I could give you that in one line.
Be a quick one.
You shouldn't do it.
Okay, yeah.
It is... yeah, okay. The first point I'd like to make is that it is regarded in heaven as murder.
Mm.
But there's a lot more to it than that. Now, when a soul is intended to come to earth to carry on its spiritual evolution, that soul can't come to earth without, shall we say, in simple terms, God's permission.
Mm.
Okay, so nobody gets to come here unless it's been officially authorised by the spiritual hierarchy. That's the first point. So when a soul is sent down and is born, it has a mission. But if that mission is aborted because the parents, for some reason, decide they don't want to have that child, then that child's spiritual evolution has been curtailed, which was not intended. Now let's just try and take that a little bit further. Let's say that person who was intended to live its life was somebody really significant. Somebody whose mission was to have a major impact on the world in a good way. Maybe they're a great spiritual teacher, like Jesus or like Buddha or Hare Krishna, you know. And their mission has been curtailed through abortion. This could have a major impact upon the world because they're not here. They're not here to do the good works that they were intended to do in accordance with their divine plan. So preventing that person from growing up and doing what they're meant to do has had major implications for the entire planet.
So to be devil's advocate, what about if that person's plan in the world, the baby's plan in the world, was to be an evil, nasty, horrible person?
Okay, so we're talking here about dark roles now. As you know, I've got a song on the album called Dark Roles, which does explain the purpose of dark roles and how, although they may cause a lot of chaos and upheaval and harm to people, overall the effect of their incarnation will have some positive outcome. And I think we discussed this fairly recently when we compared the effect that Gandhi had upon the world and the effect for the good and the effect that Hitler had on the world, which ostensibly was negative, but it had also behind the scenes, when you really examine what he did and the potential outcomes of that, it had some good things as well. The world has a divine plan, and all the people on it are all players on the stage of life, as Shakespeare said. We have our entrances and our exits, and we play different roles for a reason, for a purpose. And the purpose of planet Earth is to become a star. This planet is destined to become a star. And what that actually means is that all the darkness that's on the planet will be turned into light, and then we will be a bright star in the firmament. And so the dark roles and the light roles have a bearing on this, and they together, working together, will bring that about.
So every baby, every child has a massive potential to be a star.
Yeah. So, this is, I have to say, this is an incredibly emotional subject. Now, one of the questions that are often put when this subject is discussed. Okay, well, supposing the lady was raped or gang raped, something really horrible. Like, for example, I'll give you an example from history. Queen Boudica. She went against the Romans, and she was whipped, and her daughters were gang raped. And that was the cause of the uprising against the Romans, who nearly got kicked out of England, out of Britain. Now, if they had had children, which they didn't, because they died, one could say, well, yeah, they were gang raped by Roman soldiers as a punishment. Abortion, no problem. You could follow that line, couldn't you? But they were gang raped. Maybe that was part of the divine plan. Maybe that was the thing that made Boudica, who was so enraged, and one can totally sympathise with that view, was so enraged by what the Romans had done that she said, enough is enough. We ain't going to take this anymore. We're going to kick the Romans out of Britain. And what a wonderful attempt was made to do that. Now, was that part of Boudica's divine plan? I don't know. And
that era of time, abortion would have been very, very different to how it's perceived and how it's dealt with now.
I haven't finished. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's
sorry,
fine.
I've just got to finish off because I've lost the plot now. I'm not going to get back onto it. So, under the circumstances of some terrible crime that's been committed against a woman, okay, rape, gang rape, whatever, is she justified in aborting the baby? That's the question. Now, one has great sympathy, and one can understand one would possibly want to do that. But how does God see it? He would still say no, because it could be it could be, and I'm not saying it is, but it could potentially be that the person on the receiving end of that horrendous crime may have been party to such things in a previous life and had to experience what it was like themselves. This could be a payback of karma. It could be. But, having said that, murder is wrong.
Yeah. Because I don't know what the week period of a legal abortion is in this country, but I know it differs in different countries. And I think, if I'm right, some countries, maybe America, but again, don't quote me, it's higher than it is in England. So the legal right to terminate your pregnancy would be, many more weeks in America. I know full term is 40 weeks. And that's always sort of a bone of contention.
There's man's law and there's God's law.
Yeah.
And that's really all we're saying. If you look at the rules, the laws in different countries, they don't necessarily follow God's laws.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the only one that really counts is God's law, because that's the one you'll be judged on.
Yeah. And it's one of those. Yes, it's a very sensitive subject, but it's a very conflicting and debatable subjects, isn't it? For so many ways.
If one looks at it,
take God out of it.
If you take God out of it, most definitely. But you can't really do that.
I mean, again, there's your moral compass in there, isn't it?
This was the. You've raised an interesting point, actually. This was the justification that was used by the wife of the Roman Emperor Justinian to remove all discussion of karma and reincarnation from the Bible, because she'd done some pretty horrendous things before she married the emperor. She was a sex worker basically, but at the very highest level, and she didn't like the idea of being judged for it in accordance with the teachings in the Bible that were there at that particular time, and so she persuaded the bishops to have it removed. That was her justification, but it didn't take away, didn't remove God's law. She thought she was doing it, but by taking it out of the Bible. But come on, that's a very naive approach to one's past crimes. You cannot eradicate them by ripping out stuff from the Bible. You can't do that.
Because you choose to take it out doesn't mean to say it's out.
No. Yeah. So man's law and God's law not necessarily the same.
Yeah, it's very, very provoking and difficult subject.
But let me say, this is a very, very emotional subject.
Absolutely.
And I have the utmost sympathy when somebody is confronted with a situation like the one that Boudica and her daughters faced. I totally sympathise.
Not a good decision for any woman to have to make. But thank you for sharing your views on it.